All right, we will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Claims in the amount of $3,435,485.05.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Discussion?
Just the bigger amount is because there's a debt service is $2,131,428.
Yep,
Okay, just for the video
the debt
audience.
service piece, yes.
Thank you.
You're filling in nicely for, you always gave Allison the eye
That's right.
for that. Make her hold her feet to the fire.
Sam note.
Right.
Yep, Sam's
Warning to Sam, warning to Sam.
making notes back there, yep.
Right.
What's that? Did you vote on it?
No, we didn't yet, did we?
No, but you got motion, you got to move in second.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Employee Assistance Programs, ERC Counselors and Consultants.
Okay, so we have a current employee assistance program through another group of counselors, and I'll tell you, we had an individual that needed to call, couldn't get through. They said they didn't have room for her. So I had a problem with that right away. So I ended up reaching out to another one that I was more familiar with, and as it turns out, they are $4,500 cheaper, and let me see what I had in there. I think it was, yeah, $4,500 cheaper, and they would be able to provide 8 service sessions as opposed to 4. So it's more service for less cost. And they would be able to start November 1st. The other contract is a monthly contract. I would recommend changing over to this other one. They're familiar, I'm familiar with them, and they do provide the same services that we were getting before.
I'm interested in the way that they're compensated. So it's on page 11, item 6. So they charge a fee per employee that we have.
Total, yes.
Total employees, but they also provide services to our employees' family members.
Yes.
Dependents and
Yep.
household.
Yep,
So
it's all one
that's
fee.
a variable number, but that's how they run their operation.
Yep.
Is, so in some cases, there might be more need or demand. But that's a set locked-in fee, and that seems,
Yeah.
we've dealt with that before. Was that how we compensated the other company?
Yes, it was very similar. Very similar contract, very similar language, and identical services other than more sessions, and I know the other contract service is more available. I don't want to ever have an employee call with a need and then be turned away.
Right.
So,
Well, it's certainly challenging. You do hear high demand for mental health support, whatever form it might take. So it's good to know they have that commitment and we're certainly, hopefully
Yep.
holding them to that.
Yes.
Because it's critical, and it's not easy to provide that service. I recognize that. To have enough providers to meet that need, because it's unknown how often they're going to be
very
called
true,
on.
yes, yep.
So,
I'll move we approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve. Any further discussion?
One thing to
Favor?
notice, is that we're locked in for a full year with them each time, and it's automatic renewal. So there's a big difference in the contract from the
Yeah.
current one.
To Brent's credit, on that particular part of the term, they had asked for a 3-year term.
Yes.
And we negotiated it down to a 1-year term.
Okay.
So they wanted to be locked in longer, and you'll note that there's an early termination that you're required to pay out the remainder of the contract. And through negotiation, that came down to a year.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, we're still saving $4,500 annually.
All right, anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Information technology discussion.
Okay. I'll kick,
If you want, Austin is in the waiting room.
okay.
Zoom, but you have to sign into the Zoom account on your computer and take over as host.
Okay, I do.
Yep. It's your email.
Yeah, why don't you, still a newer service for me. Okay, what was the name of the thing again?
Sorry.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yep. So if you want to talk.
Yeah, I'll get it, you take care of that, I appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. All right, so, we were asked to bring forward some information regarding the computer services that we currently have for the city, and currently under our budget for 2025, we were looking at possibly hiring in a full-time person for the police department. Looking at, I think last time we talked, looking at the possible expense of that individual, we had them at $67,000 a year to bring somebody in that might have those expertise, realizing, no, that's, I'm echoing. There we go. Thanks.
See how IT plays an integral part.
We don't even need IT. Look at that.
Right into that.
That's right.
Okay. All right. So, anyway, so looking at the current services that we have through CIT, we were talking with them about, is there a way to bring maybe more in-house services into the city and offset the cost of what we were considering for the police add-on position, and rather than having somebody come in-house, having them take over some of those services. So currently we have an individual here that's here for 12 hours, and they're proposing expanding to a full 36 hours a week worth of in-house services, and for essentially the same cost of adding a police personnel. Now I know we talked last time about the police personnel. I don't think we would have been able to bring in an IT person for $67,000 a year. I just don't see it. We're probably going to be in the range of maybe 125, 130 total with benefits. Looking at the last sheet in your packet, in your finance packet, I printed out the budget for the last, let's see, back to 2021. Our in-house IT services at the very bottom there cost us $307 a year. Then in 2022, it went up to $317. In 2023, it went up to $329. And in 2024, it would have been probably a little higher because we did our wage and comp study. So they didn't make it into 2024. The 2024 costs are the CIT services. And then you can see our current budget is $213,500, which includes CIT plus other services, licensing and things like that. For the 2025 budget, we currently have proposed the $238,500. However, if you look at the note on the bottom, if we add an additional $100,000, instead of adding it to the police position for IT services, we add it to our IT budget of $100,000, we would get to $338,500, which CIT would be able to perform all in-house services, provide services to the police department, and then advisory services on some of the requirements under LASSO and some other things. So I'm going to take it from here and kind of change it over to Kyle. I did hand out to everybody on the table CIT's proposal for the additional services, and then we also wanted to talk. And I know Councilmember Randy, you had Councilmember Randy, Morissette, yes, you had questions about the services and in-house, and then I think between CIT and staff, we can kind of help discuss some of those questions as we go through
the
it.
narrative of our last conversation on this.
Yep,
yes.
and we're Kyle agreed to come in and have discussions with that. So go ahead and take it from there, where we're at and what we're proposing here for in-house services.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. I believe it'd be helpful just to do an overview of the services we are currently providing. Would that be helpful? Through the current services side, there's the managed services component, which makes up remote support help desk that is available 24/7, 365. As you deal with CJIS and related sides, we do have a number of our support personnel that are background vetted with the Wisconsin BCA for CJIS support. That is not all individual sides on the remote support desk side of it, as you're probably well aware, because of the individual vetting process on some of these individual sides of it. That doesn't preclude us from ability to do things like password resets or other things for officers when they're experiencing, inability to get onto the systems. But they do have access to support that does provide access to support and personnel in the advantage that the entire network is unavailable at all to the city. Then you have full emergency responses come in and help remediate any IT issues of it, whether they happen after hours or any time during the day. That's help desk support for your city employees. That is active monitoring of your systems, so it's active inventory and up-down status information 24/7 of the systems. Things around cybersecurity and system updates, so think in terms of your system patching, things around the system protections for cybersecurity. What we call endpoint detection response, or antivirus would be a more common name for those things. Cybersecurity awareness training is included in those services for the city and staff. Annual testing of vulnerabilities, both inside and outside, and dark web lookups are also covered under that system side of it. So there's a whole breadth of services that are provided in conjunction with the ongoing support. And what is proposed, in addition to the 12-hour side, is to then bring in, on a monthly contract, an individual to do 3 days a week to the city to provide that additional on-site support. The police department is a very common use of that, and it's very common in the cities we support, just given the amount of technology that they have on the officers in the squads and just in general side of it. So it generally requires a lot of the ongoing support.
And I'll say with that, so a lot of the existing in-house person, the 12 hours, his time has been helping out a lot over at the police department. So we're not able to, some of the other areas, bless them, but they're not able to get the services to some of those other areas sometimes. So it's a lot of tickets and things like that that we have to do. But there are services, I think, that CIT is able to provide, especially with the additional 36 hours the additional 24 hours, are able to provide then to the police department, and then the other individual at 12 hours can help out City Hall and other aspects, City Hall, water utilities, and the fire department.
Well, therein lies the big concern. I mean, last time we talked, it was 90% police department, 10% the rest of the city. How do we equalize the value of this extra 36 hours now? And how's that going to look? Who's going to spend the time here? How do we prioritize? Because these folks here are just as, this is outside of the managed services.
Sure.
Protecting our risk cyber-wise and all that. This is, in understanding how intense the police department is as far as protecting that information as well. But these folks here in the other departments are just as important, needing help.
Well, and most services can be provided online, and that's the wave. That's the general way of computer services now. You don't need somebody in-house to be able to provide those services. So they have a group of, I think, 75 different expertise in computer programming systems to be able to provide that immediate in-house.
Well, so my point
needs.
is it going to be at 36, 90 more % of the time at the police department, or is it going to be spread out? Are they going to be spread out?
I think it's based on calls, but
Yeah, there would be a resource to the city, so it'd be all based on the same ticketing system. It's the same, pool of side of it. So it'd be based on the criticality of the tickets. As you look, typically what you'd find again in the police department is the need for the on-site person to go there is usually related because it's in a squad car. It requires more physical touch. So the intention would be a lot of your administration user sides, if they call the remote support desk, they get immediate remote support, and that's faster than even walking over to the desk in a lot of cases. if things can be remediated, there's a physical difficulty with a hookup or a connection, they don't have the monitor and some other troubleshooting like we saw Randy going through, then maybe you want somebody to come, stand behind and do a physical look or hookup side of it for the on-site. But there is a high percent where you can get, immediate help with the remote side of it. So it would all
And then
be
the additional
classified based on
reporting
the tickets.
aspect too, that we were talking about. The additional reporting aspect required by the police department that,
I guess the fundamental
Is it needed
question
in other
is, are we
places?
just increasing this to help the police department out?
no, I think we're increasing it to help the entire city out.
I don't see it going down that way. Because we're all right now, everybody's, including us, have to pick up the phone and call SCIT. Okay? So there's remote. So why do we need to increase another 26 hours or whatever it is for a person to be here when we're picking up the phone? And then let's say, for example, our front desk up here is picking up the phone to reboot her computer. And at the same time, if they really needed somebody, they're down at the police department chasing a fire squad, a police department around, or a car around, and or up at the news station, which is a lengthier time up there to go. I mean, I just don't see it shaking down the way you're trying to sell it. But let's move forward. I mean, let's finish the presentation.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get a handle on the question really there.
Are we just supplementing more time for the police department? That's what it seems like.
Well, Randy, from what I understood, the other idea we talked about was hiring another employee. And, there's pension, insurance, all of that goes with that. That would not be an actual patrol officer. It would be a police department employee that just did IT. And I mean, that is obviously a weighty decision too, is, to add staff and where should we add that, which department. There's other departments that probably would like to add staff. So the one thing about a contract like this is we can always reel it back. Maybe we don't go full 36, I hear what you're saying. But it does seem that, from what I understand, the police chief was explaining last time we met, was that they happened to have an officer, it was a regular patrol officer, but he was not able to be out on the street, and he had a knack at
Yeah, I
IT
heard all
things. Right. So he was the one that sat in the car and did some of that under the phone instruction of someone from CIT. So somebody does have to touch the car, if I'm understanding it correctly. It's so complicated that they have to be responding.
I think every computer, eventually somebody's got to touch
True.
and handle and swap out. I mean, so we're not just talking the computers that have problems, but the computers that we have to swap out because they're aging.
Okay.
Right? So I think we have a program that we're going to be looking at maybe like a third every year, trying to swap out the computers.
The police department is scheduled on an every 3-year.
Yep, and then the
side
rest
but
of it
typically
is
with
5
the-
years, I
with
think
the
we
mobile and
talked about.
5 years on the standard desktops within the city, which is just usually due to wear and tear and on the overall equipment side of it.
I get all that. That's great. And I agree with doing that. But my focus is making sure we're not just adding on additional IT hours and it only goes to the police department.
Yeah, and I think this is a solution that we're not just hiring an individual for only the police department. We're hiring an individual that'll be able to help broadly throughout the city. But I think a lot of the focus, it will be toward the police because they have more hands-on requirements.
And CIT is flexible on this agreement. This is, essentially a month-to-month agreement. We're willing to put the price for a year so you know that there's no rate change, but we're not looking for the long-term commit. You can have a 30-day out. If the city notifies us that you want to change, or we see that there is not enough or it's too much, we can change. Or if you decide that the city would wish to go another direction, we can understand and respect that side. The other component to mention with this is is what we call the governance, risk, and compliance of bringing in a virtual CISO into the side to assist with the CGIS and LASSO policies and procedures and
Yeah.
guidance. And again, as we mentioned in Brent, when we were talking through, was to have that be consultative for the city as well, because the city has cybersecurity insurance needs and obviously other security-related needs that CISO will be available to consult with. So again, it's really just a balance of, the police department gets a lot of the talking points, again, just because of the technology percentile, but these are allocated to the city as far as CIT is concerned. And the tickets come in the same way. We criticize, they're under prioritization side of it, but that's strictly how we view them. There isn't, a segmentation of the ticketing side to say this is a police.
The priority is on time, or?
It's on the impact to of what the tickets
So
involve.
they're somewhat weighted.
They're definitely weighted. So an issue that resolved, that has an issue for the entire city's operation, obviously moves immediately to the list. If it involves a user that's unable to do their job, it moves to the list. And, with a police officer, that could be, that their squad car doesn't have the wireless connection to be able to look up their system. So we have to go look at the squad car. But everything is equally weighted based on those priority sides where we would go.
Well, and I should point out, I think the value that the city's received from CIT to date, as opposed to having somebody in-house, it's probably 3 or 4-fold. I mean, I'm looking at Mike back there. Mike, I got his attention now. I think the last year, the stuff that CIT has worked through and fixed for the city, I think Mike could probably speak to it better than I can. But when they came on board, I think July of last year, CIT started working through our problems. The force that they bring and be able to take us where we need to go as opposed to maybe having somebody in-house, I think it's been quite a big difference for the city.
Yeah, and I apologize. Just got back, had a nice little cross-country meet in White Bear. So,
Did you win?
I did some light jogging, to put it that way, from one side to the other side of the field. So it's about the extent of, but I won in that. Yeah. No, I think a lot of it. I don't know if you touched on it previously, but the discovery process is substantial, right? Looking into, okay, they have a basic idea of our environment and then understanding what our actual reality is, right? And then having to basically update everything for everybody in a variety of different ways and means. Especially it was heavy in PD, right? All of our squads had laptops that were not, and forgive me if we've already
They weren't the tough books that you need for.
They weren't. They didn't have the horsepower that they needed to operate effectively. Well, we can't have that. They have to have what they need to be able to function effectively out in the field, right? There's a lot of transition Chief had in, was it communications or the big change in from
the track system.
The track system update or all that. I mean, these were big undertakings that they took care of. And, to Brent's point is that they do have that expertise. They have that wide breadth of, we're not going to find somebody that can have expertise in name your program here and then your program over here and your program over there. They will have those resources available to us. So I think they've done a great job. To Brent's point, it doesn't come without its challenges and costs and hiccups, and nothing's perfect. But I think for the most part, they've certainly performed admirably over the last year.
And then to point out, I think as we know, the person from the PD that was aiding and assisting with some of that, they're gone now. They retired, right?
Yep.
So we're looking at the CIT contract and thinking we need to bring them on more sooner than later. I don't know if this is one that can wait till your next year's budget. This is one that, again, it's a month situation. I think we add it in as soon as we can because we do need them on board to work with the PD and get things moving.
So on this proposal, we're really only increasing it by $6,200. If I'm reading it correctly, which?
I believe it's 7,500 for that contract position.
So we're at 314 and then we're dropping it to 308, so we're saving $6,200? Is that what we're doing? Or-
Yeah, there's in that handout side, it's using the numbers that Brent emphasized there with the, the expected cost of a full-time employee with benefits at 125 in comparison to the proposed,
Yep.
adding the individual on a contract basis for those 3 days a week.
Yes, and then looking into next year's budget, with all the licensing and features that we do need, we're looking at 338 in total for the computer budget.
The
That's what I
additional
have.
100,000 you added on this last sheet of the paper.
Yeah, so the 2025 proposed for our information technologies piece of Hudson at 238,500, that's that last page of the
Yep.
finance report. We would add 100,000 that we were proposing in the police budget, and slide that over to the IT budget for the 2025 proposed. So you'd be looking at 338,500. That allows us 30,000 for all additional licensing in that we may need throughout the year. So that's 30,000 more than what the CIT is proposing, but that's part of heading into 2025. There's licensing and renewals that we do. CIT takes care of some of them, not all of them.
Yeah, the two components we added in there was, one, the contract employee for the 3 days a week, and then the virtual CISO for the security officer side of those. That's a contract monthly as well for that consulting.
So assuming we approve this, when does the new package start then? Next week, next month?
We can start as soon as next week, so.
And again, I'm expecting to add that into the budget then for 2025, which is what I have currently in the numbers that I'll still be presenting later, or in a few minutes. Okay.
Are we making any decisions tonight, or just?
I would like to forward this on, because the longer we wait, the longer the police are without. I mean, they're doing their best again with Marshall in-house, but again, then the rest of staff for in-house services are lacking a little bit as well.
Is it fair to ask the police chief his opinion of it?
Well, I know what he's gonna say. Well, yeah, right.
Well, I just hope it's the right decision, or right,
Well, I
answer.
mean, last week we were talking about adding a person to the department. that
Yeah, so
would
that's a good
be
point.
there. So, I mean, I'm just interested in your input.
Sure.
Good point.
What part?
Do you feel like this will be adequate coverage?
I do, and as he was talking about, right, the CGIS officer, the LASSO officer, we just sent our admin to the CIB conference, and there are significant changes coming, and we're not IT professionals, right? Traditionally, what we've done is just assign someone at the police department to be the LASSO, and then all of a sudden we have this huge audit that we have to map out network systems and firewalls, and we don't know anything about that, right? So, I mean, it took us probably 6 months to complete the audit, which was like 4 months overdue, because we don't have the knowledge base to do something like that.
So your own staff did that in-house, audited?
Right.
And we still need to designate an officer, the way I'm understanding, but CIT will be there to guide them through that process. We'll work together with CIT to guide through the
And
process.
that's the biggest part. And like I've explained before, right, when we have something that goes down in a squad, that squad's out of service, right? We can't use it. So I guess from the hierarchy of the tickets, right, I mean, that's a pretty important deal that they can't generally do remotely, especially if it's a connectivity issue. And there's something with they're called the cradle point, right? It allows you to connect to the internet in the squad car when you're out, not in a building, right? So those are some of the main issues that we have. That and the 12 different software programs that we run on a daily basis and
Do you not
access.
have paper backup anymore? A ticket
No,
book?
nope. The state will not accept them.
Oh.
Everything is going electronic and paperless. So, but that's just, that tracks, that citation generating software and crash reporting software, that's one, right? We have our case management reporting system is all electronic. We have our body cameras, we have our squad cameras, we have our flock cameras, we have the traffic cameras. I mean, these are all different forms of software that the guys and gals out in the field need to be able to access.
So when would you like this to start?
Yesterday?
Okay. And
I understand,
no,
it's a little bit tongue in cheek there, but I mean, it's important. It's important that we find a resolution as a city for our IT needs, and it's not just my department,
so if we approve this tonight to start as soon as possible, then do we have money in the budget to cover it?
Yeah, I believe so. There's some money left over in the police department budget, and there's money from a couple of the other departments. We're edging toward, October, November, December. It's 3 months left at the heightened price of about maybe $30,000.
Okay, so we were talking about $30,000 for the rest of the
Roughly,
the year?
yeah.
Okay.
30
I'll make
to
the motion to
3,700.
approve that we get this started as soon as possible.
And we'll work out the final details of the contract with Nick and finalize it, but
I second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. Discussion?
Will we get monthly reports back? Or every 3 months, give us a quarterly report on how it's going?
yeah, we can do that. I mean, they track data on calls and incoming things, so yes, I think we can provide that. Kyle, any issues with that? Okay.
Well,
What are you
certainly-
looking for, Randy? The number of tickets that they're solving or
Yeah,
the,
and feedback on how it's working.
Hopefully, the staff all knows you have open door policy. If they feel like they're not getting the response time and they have a need, their system is down or something, and they're feeling like they're not a priority, we need to hear about that.
Yes.
But it seems to me that, right, if we tried to hire one individual to come in and work at the police department, are they going to be knowledgeable enough to handle all those different softwares? And what about when they're on vacation for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So this does give a broader arching support to the whole city.
Well, and let's not forget, and I know that CIT is right here too, but I've always said, and I've said it to them too, that every couple of years in all of your services, you should really go out and see what's all available. And if CIT is the best out there, they'll win the contract over and over again. So I firmly believe in that, and I know we've talked about that, which is, again, we just had one EAP. We weren't happy with their services for the EAP provider. Well, what do? You find another provider. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. But yeah, these are good services. They've provided good services so far, so I think this would work pretty well.
Anything else? All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Second presentation of the 2025 budget.
Okay, I will work faster through this. We're on the budget schedule now. You guys have seen this. I don't need to, I think, go over all the considerations because we did that the last time in detail. If anybody's got questions from last time, I know you've had a chance to look at all the materials I passed out, or I sent everybody the presentation from the last time. I can send the revised presentation out to you tomorrow, but this is, again, in alignment with what we were talking about at the last meeting. All right, we are hovering right at the same amount. The mill rate being proposed at this point is 5.02, which is $502 per 100,000 assessed. It amounts to an increase of $181.40 per year, or $15.11 per month
On,
on a $400,000 home.
no, I knew that. I
You
just-
knew that, yes.
Yeah, but
I appreciate the guidance, thanks. That's good. Okay, on a $400,000 home. Then we're looking at, I wanted to bring this up and have a quick discussion on levy calculations and what happens during re-evaluation year. We're heading into that for the for 2025, we'll be doing a full revaluation of the homes, or of properties in the city. For the 2020 budget, the assessed value was at 1.68 billion. With the reassessment, it went to 2.22 or 277 billion. What happened with that then, the mill rate went from, which it's higher than what we're proposing now, mill rate was at 5.44, which is $544 per 100,000. That's what it was in 2020. It dropped all the way down to 4.13, which means $413 per 100,000 borrowed. So kind of give you an idea, when you head into evaluation year, it's possible that you would switch out or flip some of the values, and you'd end up with a lower mill rate per 100,000. Okay? What happens with that? Let's see, I had that up, yep. I wanted to take a look at and show there's a levy amount that we are not going to. There's a levy limit, right, that the city is allowed to go to, but in this year's budget, we've made sure to keep it lower than where our maximum was allowed. So we could propose to go to a mill rate of 5.17, which is $517 per 100,000, which would increase an additional $62.06 per year for a $100,000 home, or $5.17 more a month. The idea would be everybody within their budgets. We've kept everything fairly decent, fairly low. The only thing that really has changed is the healthcare costs and the costs for employees, per employee, the worked-in raises that we have in those as well. So realizing that between that and the debt service that we've had to go to for the new proposed buildings, and I'll touch down on that in just a second. The city staff has done a really good job of keeping their budgets fairly steady. And I can go back a couple points here. We're only increasing by 0.23% overall. So the mill rate for our levy operations, our operations, has only gone up 7 cents. Yes, I think that's about 7 cents on a $100,000 borrow. So that's pretty significant that we're not taking more than what we need to operate. Okay, so we're keeping our operations budget fairly level, but understanding that the mill rate did climb because of, primarily because of the need for the debt service to fill out the two new buildings that we're looking at.
So just a quick question on the estimated assessed valuation. You got 2,400 in the 23-24 budget. That was realized, but we are assuming the 2,500 in 2024-25.
I'm trying to think what you,
So
say that again.
I'm looking at the 23-24 budget. The new assessed value was 2.4 billion.
Yes.
You're assuming we're
Okay, I
going
see
to
where you're at.
2.5 billion in 24-25.
Yes. So we did talk with our assessor. That is the closest that he can get now. We won't have the actual numbers until, was that later October or? Early November. No, early November. So we won't have the actual numbers, but he feels 2.5 billion is a reasonable number to assume at this point.
What if we don't hit that and we go?
I think he's projecting lower than where he will be. And if that's the case, I don't think it's going to be, it's going to be 2.5 or higher, I believe. He's conservatively projecting at 2.5 billion. If it goes up higher than that, then the levy that we're going to need or ask for will drop.
Okay, so it's not automatically going to stay at the 4 or 5.24. It'll
Yep.
drop.
It would,
Whatever it rounds out to, or falls under whatever the valuation is.
Exactly, yes. So if his estimated assessed valuation comes in, say at 2.6, I believe it's going to fall under the 500 mark, 500 per 100,000. The mill rate will fall lower.
Makes it a little bit more palatable, but we cautiously assume that assumption.
Yep. But
With the economy the way it kind of is right.
well, and remember, we're still lower overall, and something to know, we're lower overall than we were back in 2020,
Right.
right? By $42 per 100,000 borrowed.
Which again makes
I've not
us more
borrowed, assessed.
palatable for what we're facing.
Okay. Yes, yeah. So it could come in a little lower, but right now, those are the numbers that we're using for this year's budget. And as this goes along through October and in the beginning of November, we'll have the finalized numbers. Okay, I wanted to show the levy mill rates. So this chart shows you on 100,000, or excuse me, on every dollar, let's just break it down all the way down to a dollar. On every dollar of tax, 56 cents of it goes to the school, 18 cents of it goes to the county, 24 cents, only a quarter of it is the cities, and the tech is at 2 cents on every dollar. That is what we had in 2024. I don't have what the school district, the county, or the tech are going to do this year, but I would imagine they're going to stay around these amounts. We might get to 20, 26, 28%, right? But we're still at about one quarter on every dollar is essentially the tax. It's always assumed that when you get your tax bill, right, that, well, that's what you're paying the city. Well, no, a majority of that's going to the school, good portion's going to the county, and yes, about a quarter of it is being paid by the city. And that's the portion that we have to operate under, is that 24 cents on every dollar that we put out in tax. So what that amounts to is, you can look at this chart, proposed expenditures by department, and you're looking at public safety. You got police, which is the large red circle, and then you have fire. So your public safety and police take up about half of your total budget. And then you've got public works for your roads and streets and everything else, and library, surprisingly, is fairly up there, and then community development comes in. Actually, community development comes in after clerk treasurer. But I'll tell you what, we're going to be looking at clerk treasurer and splitting those out into treasurer and clerk going forward. But so you see your departments and where the dollars are going. And a lot of it goes to the public safety, which is really one of the primary charges of the city.
But we don't have a treasurer. We have a finance director, right?
Yeah, that's why I don't agree with how it was combined. I think it's just something that evolved when you switched out of just having a clerk and the administrator operating as clerk and administrator, and it sort of split out from there. It's not properly defined anymore, but it is still a single budget item, is that department. So we'll split those out going forward, and that'll be something that I'm sure Sam will be able to take care of quickly. I'm already signing tasks. Okay, so here is the proposed personnel requests. And again, we already talked about the police IT, and I think we've resolved that one for the time being. We won't pursue a police IT tech person. Again, that was at almost 70,000 wages. I don't think we would have been able to get or recruit somebody at that anyways. So I think it works out well with CIT. And then the fire inspector, hiring them halfway through the year would be at a $30,000 increase to the budget this year. Again, 40% of that wage goes to, 40% of the wages are picked up by the other jurisdictions. Okay. Capital improvements. We already went over this chart, so you understand, debt's going up with the requirement of building the buildings that we're proposing to do. And we went over this. Here's the cost of the buildings. What I want to break down is the cost of the buildings by what was proposed and where we are, so that I think everybody out there understands a little differently about how we got from where we were maybe a year or two ago to all of a sudden doing two major legacy type projects that are, the 40-year projects. And showing that that is such a big impact, and it really is a significant increase in the levy or the mill rate that we're requesting, because they are large projects, right? And I know you have to explain to your constituents where that money comes in and why we're doing it now as opposed to, waiting some years to do so. So we're looking at, remember the police have been in the basement of the library for over 10 years. I think somebody told me 12 years. And it was originally thought, well, they'd be in the basement of the library for maybe a 5-year period. And Chief, tell me if I'm wrong on that. About 5 years, maybe?
5-year plan, yeah.
Okay. So we're 7 years over the 5-year period, and knowing that they're crammed in to some, I guess, working conditions that you wouldn't really want in a police department. It's kind of crammed in there. So we have the DPW is operated out of many different locations in the city, and this proposed new location, the new garage, has been talked about, I think, in the city's plans. Somebody mentioned almost 40 years we've been talking about this, needing a new DPW garage facility. And then what we do when we move to the new facility, we'll have these vacant parcels that we'll shift out of, and we'll have to figure out what we're doing with those as a city as well. But I wanted to point out how long these projects have been talked about. And, again, had you started the new facility 40 years ago, well, you'd probably be ready to place it by now. But, it always cheaper build yesterday, right? So we're looking at the proposed new building costs. About 3-4 years ago, I think, Mike or Miraz, we were talking about $14 million for a 3,500 square foot facility at the time.
35,000, yes.
35,000 square foot? Not 3,500. That's awfully small to fit. Yeah. Wow.
1 or 2 trucks.
Yes. A little tighter than what they have in the police department. Oh, there you go. Just moving it there. It's probably about 3,500. Okay. So
It's $935 million now.
yeah, yeah. It's a little cheaper than that. Thanks a lot for bringing that up again. I'm never going to live that down, am I? All right. So the police building was projected to be about $24 million. Total cost of both projects, we were looking at $38 million or $362 a square foot. Looking at renovating the buildings that we have. Now, the garage is now projected, now these are the new costs, right, that we added on based on, I think, some of the underestimates that we had from about a year ago. We're looking at $11,400,000 for the new garage, and that includes the land and the existing building. Same with the police. The building was projected to be, this building is projected to be around $12.9 million, which also includes the land and the building. So total cost for both projects is $24,300,000 with $231 a square foot. So compared to new and those old projections, now I doubt the buildings would probably be that cost today, but the projections that we had before on building new buildings, as opposed to renovating these existing buildings, we're already about $130 a square foot less than where we were. Looking at a couple of constructions that are out there today being proposed, the Rosemont facility is a 160,000 square foot building, and that's at a cost of $58 million, which comes to $362 a square foot. That does not include the land cost, right? So these are what buildings are costing to build today. Oakdale facility is 75,000 square feet at a cost of $31 million, which comes to $413 a square foot, and that again does not include the land costs. The two Hudson facilities combined are 105,000 square feet. The total cost $24.3 million or $231 a square foot. If you look at it as direct comparison to the two above, you're actually at about $162 a square foot if you're looking at just the building construction costs. So you're getting a pretty good steal for land and construction at $231 a square foot. Those other two are just the building costs. So when you look at today's construction and what you've done, I came in here, I'm two months into this project. You guys have been working on it for years, or at least well over a year. I think, looking back, I would have probably suggested the same thing, even though I think the original cost estimates were lower. You're still coming in well ahead for these two construction projects. Now, again, would it have been better to have these spaced out 10 years? Yeah, but the opportunities were there for both buildings. I don't think you could have passed those up, and in 10 years, I think one of those building costs probably would have been the cost that you're paying now for both. So you really need to kind of look at how that plays out and understand that today's cost, it's always going to be more expensive later, and you've had an opportunity here to do two large legacy projects for essentially the cost of one. So different ways to look at it. I know we can slice that a number of different ways and different pieces, but I want to kind of look out to Mike, and Jeff, if there's anything that maybe you wanted to add on to what we had talked about. Just the projects, are rolling along. And I should also point out, we don't have the true construction costs yet. They haven't gone out for bid. So when the bid goes out, could go a little higher, could go a little lower. But we're pretty certain in where they're at now with both the architectural companies that we're working with. We're certain with today's dollars, this is about where it's going to be.
Is this where you're gonna ask us for the additional 8 million? Or 6 million?
No, that was already put in the budget, so I'm hoping you guys go forward with that. I think, you're really looking at, you could roll the projects and forget about doing one or the other, but again, it's just gonna cost you more down the road. And these are legacy projects that I think you can fit into the existing budget. And I think, looking at next year, your levy's going to go up a little more for these projects as well. Just where we're faced, looking at this rise here, right, we're going to get to a peak before it starts dropping off again. So that's what we're looking at for all of your construction costs and all of your capital improvement projects.
Is this with the additional numbers?
Yes, this is with that additional
So the
amount added
highest
in.
is 2031, 3031?
Yes, I had that handout last time, the filled out, but so you could see those a little clearer. But yeah, and this is taking into account that our equalized value is not going up. He's coming up to say it, good. So the equalized value is not raising under this chart, knowing that you'll likely climb, and that'll reduce these amounts as well.
We're assuming no net new construction, no growth.
Yeah, this is assuming net new construction, no growth.
No.
Yep.
No.
So it's a pretty conservative look at it if you're assuming those two factors. Okay. And what I would propose is to pass this on to the council and let the council take it from here, I guess, as a whole.
Any questions?
Well, I do have a comment, and I have spoken with our city administrator today about it, or earlier, that the Public Works Committee has discussed some of the cost overruns or the anticipated costs based on current estimates several times in our public meetings. And, our Public Works Director is trying to sharpen the pencil and see if we can reduce costs, considering postponing some of the equipment because it is an existing building. If we can do with something, and we'll, of course, we have to be prepared to replace something later if it doesn't work well. So we have had those discussions, and And I appreciate that because I think the public, I mean, I'm sure you're all getting asked, you know, why is it costing more, things like that. I would like to have a discussion or to learn more a little bit about what's going on with the public safety, the police department's building, and why that's anticipated higher costs. So I don't know if that isn't on the agenda tonight necessarily, but I think that, again, we do have to answer to the public about, you know, the decisions we've made, going for 2 buildings at one time. As you mentioned, we don't have the final bids yet, so it is possible that things might actually cost more.
Well, I think rather than calling it out, maybe we should just ask them, why was the overrun? It was the HVAC, a big part of it.
And you and I know that, but we haven't really discussed that, and I think it would be helpful whether it's appropriate on the agenda tonight or not, but to understand that, so the public understands, and I appreciate the way you presented it tonight to show the pros and cons of what a new construction would take. And certainly for both projects, being sort of more central in the city was determined to be a very important factor. Certainly the police department is going to be more accessible to businesses and homeowners, you know, throughout the city, a little more central location. And right now, the Public Works facility is on the far northwest corner of the city, and we're growing more to the south and to the east. So those are 2 pluses. I mean, again, I'm not regretting our decision at all. I just want us to be able to help understand ourselves and explain to the public going forward why things are costing more. Again, it was an estimate. It's sort of like you buy a house and you have an inspector and a walkthrough, but then something happens the 3rd week you're in the house, you know, these surprises do happen. But it's our responsibility to the public. That's my only comment, thank you.
And knowing this debt will stay with the city for that long term on the graph. I mean, it will. But again, I think it's good that you went for the 2 buildings that were there. They're great locations. And again, the cost-wise, I mean, you're just not going to beat that cost. And we're seeing that in today's construction costs.
You're not looking for formal action, we're just moving it, it's on the agenda for council.
Just discussion here right now.
Yep, just discussion, and it'll move over to the council as our next step in our overall process.
Anything else?
No,
We're good?
I have nothing else, yep.
All right, I don't have anything. Anybody?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.